I woke up in the middle of the night because my left hand had gone completely numb. That's what I thought at first, that I'd slept on it wrong. I remember staring at the ceiling of my apartment, flexing my fingers in the dark, waiting for the pins and needles to kick in. They didn't. Instead, my vision split down the middle, like someone had cracked a screen, and the room tilted sideways, and I had just enough time to grab the nightstand before I hit the floor. The paramedics found me 6 hours later when my coworker called a wellness check after I missed back-to-back morning meetings. I'd been conscious the whole time, lying on my hardwood floor, unable to get my legs to cooperate. The left side of my body had simply stopped listening to me. I'm Claire. I'm 31 years old, and I'm a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm in Columbus, Ohio. My job is to find the money people hide. I trace it through shell companies and falsified ledgers and offshore transfers that are almost, but not quite, invisible. I do this well. I've been doing it since I was 24 years old, and in 7 years I've never once missed a discrepancy. I tell you that so you understand the particular cruelty of what happened next. The one financial crime I didn't catch in time was the one happening inside my own home. The doctors called it a complex migraine with neurological involvement. They ran an MRI, found nothing structural, sent me home with a prescription and a follow-up appointment. I went back to work on Thursday. By Sunday, I was on the floor again, this time in my kitchen, and this time my brother was the one who found me. My brother Gideon is 4 years older than me. He was the first person I called when I got the diagnosis. A small arteriovenous malformation in my brainstem, tangled blood vessels that had been sitting quietly my whole life and had decided, apparently, that 31 was a good age to start announcing themselves. The neurosurgeon explained the risks. Surgery was an option, but not an immediate necessity. They wanted to monitor it, manage it with medication, control my blood pressure and stress levels. She said the word manageable 4 times in one appointment. I counted. Gideon drove 3 hours from Pittsburgh the night I called him. He showed up at my door with a duffel bag and a grocery haul, and that particular look on his face that I hadn't seen since our mother's funeral. The look that said he was frightened and was organizing the fear into tasks so he didn't have to feel it. He made me dinner. He slept on my couch. He told me he wasn't going anywhere. I believed him. I had no reason not to. Gideon had always been the stable one, the responsible one. While I was grinding through school on loans and part-time jobs, he had built a decent life as a general contractor, owned his own small company, had a good reputation, knew everyone in his county. When our mother died 3 years ago and left us her estate, a paid-off house in Westerville worth about $380,000, and a brokerage account with $210,000 in it, it was Gideon who handled the paperwork. Gideon who dealt with the attorney. Gideon who suggested we set up a joint management structure until we decided what to do with the property. I signed the documents. I trusted him. He was my brother. He stayed with me for 10 days after the diagnosis. During that time, he helped me set up automatic bill pay, got himself added to my primary bank account for emergencies, and quietly, over the course of 3 different conversations that each seemed completely reasonable on their own, persuaded me to grant him durable power of attorney. I want you to understand that I am not a stupid person. I want you to understand that I have spent 7 years professionally untangling exactly this kind of thing. But I had just been told that the blood vessels in my brain could rupture at any moment, and I was terrified, and he was my brother, and the documents were in plain English, and his explanation was logical. If something happened to me, someone needed to be able to act. Someone needed to pay my bills and manage my accounts and make medical decisions. He was the only family I had. I signed. He drove back to Pittsburgh. I started my medication. For the next 6 weeks, life was almost normal. I went to my follow-up appointments. My symptoms were stable. I worked from home 3 days a week per my doctor's recommendation, and went into the office the other 2. Gideon called every Sunday. He always asked how I was feeling. He always sounded concerned. It was my colleague Priscilla who first noticed something was off. We'd been friends since training, and she has a habit of noticing things other people don't. She's that kind of accountant, the type who reads the footnotes. She texted me one afternoon, "Hey, random question. Is everything okay with your accounts? Your Zelle limit got flagged on a shared vendor payment." I didn't understand what she meant. I hadn't made a Zelle transfer to any vendor. I pulled up my account that night. Then I pulled it up again because the first time I thought I'd misread it. Over the previous 6 weeks, while I had been taking my medication and going to my follow-up appointments, and believing that everything was under control, $47,000 had been moved out of my primary checking account in transfers of $2,000 to $4,000 to $4,000 each, spaced 4 to 7 days apart, a pattern deliberately designed to stay below the automated monitoring thresholds. The transfers went to an account I didn't recognize. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a neighbor was walking their dog. I could hear the click of its nails on the sidewalk. I opened a new spreadsheet and started building a timeline. By midnight, I had the shape of it. By 2 in the morning, I had the details. The account receiving the transfers was a business account registered to a company called GH Restoration Services, LLC, incorporated in Delaware 8 months ago. GH? Gideon Hollenbeck. My brother. He hadn't taken the money in one chunk. He hadn't done anything dramatic. He had just quietly, methodically drained me, the way water finds a crack and works it slowly until the whole wall gives way. I closed the laptop. I sat with it for a while. The version of me that existed before that diagnosis might have called him, might have confronted him immediately, demanded an explanation, given him the chance to say something that made it make sense. But I had spent 6 weeks living in the specific uncertainty of a brain that might betray me at any moment, and that experience had done something to my tolerance for chaos. It had made me very, very calm. It had made me want, above everything else, to know exactly what I was dealing with before I moved. So I didn't call him. I didn't change my passwords. I didn't freeze the account. I called Marcus instead. Marcus is a financial crimes investigator I'd worked with on a corporate embezzlement case 2 years prior. He's methodical, and he doesn't get excited, and he never jumps to conclusions, which is exactly what I needed. I emailed him the spreadsheet at 2:15 in the morning. He called me at 7. He told me it was clean. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. The transfer amounts, the timing intervals, the business entity structure, it was professionally constructed. Then he paused and said, "How long has your brother had POA access?" I told him 6 weeks. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "I want you to not touch anything yet." Can you do that? I could do that. Over the next 11 days, Marcus and his contact at a forensic accounting firm built the full picture. The $47,000 for my checking account was only part of it. Gideon had also, using the POA documents I'd signed, begun the process of liquidating my share of our mother's brokerage account. He completed 2 transfers totaling $68,000 before the brokerage's compliance department flagged unusual activity on the account. The flag had generated an automated letter. The letter had been sent to the address of record. The address of record was my apartment. I had never opened it because it was filed under the estate account name, and I thought it was routine paperwork. It was sitting on my counter. I had used it as a coaster. Marcus also found something that made the whole thing crystallize. Gideon's contracting company had been in serious trouble for 18 months. 2 major projects had gone over budget. One client had sued, and he'd taken out a high-interest business line of credit in December that had a balloon payment coming due in 40 days. The total he needed, just over $120,000. The total he had taken, or was in the process of taking for me, $115,000. He was $5,000 short of his number, which meant he wasn't done. I thought about all the Sunday phone calls. The warm voice asking how I was feeling, the very careful, very patient concern. I thought about how long he must have been planning this. Whether it started the night I called him with my diagnosis, or whether some part of him had been quietly calculating since before that, since our mother's estate was settled and we were standing in an attorney's office and he was watching me sign documents, I didn't feel betrayed. I know that sounds strange. What I felt was the specific cold clarity of a professional who has just correctly identified a fraud. The emotion would come later. Right now, there was only the shape of the problem and the question of how to close it. Marcus connected me with Diane Fellers, a prosecutor in the Financial Crimes Division of the Franklin County DA's office. She was sharp and she moved fast. She reviewed everything in 48 hours and came back with a plan. The POA I had signed was valid. The transfers were technically executed within its scope, which was, she explained, exactly why financial elder and dependent adult abuse cases are so difficult to prosecute when the victim is granted access willingly. But the brokerage transfers were different. The compliance flag had escalated to an internal review, and the brokerage's legal team had determined that Gideon had misrepresented the purpose of the liquidation when he called their customer service line. He had told them I had authorized the transfer to fund a medical procedure. I had not authorized anything. I had not spoken to the brokerage in months. That misrepresentation, Diane told me, was wire fraud. Federal. She also needed me to do something difficult. She needed me to keep Gideon from suspecting anything was wrong until they had enough to move, which meant I needed to keep acting like his concerned little sister who was managing her frightening diagnosis, and was very grateful he'd set everything up for her. I called him that Sunday as usual. He asked how I was feeling. I told him I'd had a rough week, some new symptoms, that I was a little scared. His voice shifted into that particular register of gentle, practiced worry. He said he could come back down if I needed him. He said I shouldn't be dealing with this alone. I said I might take him up on that. He said, just say the word. I said, I will. The wire fraud investigation required a cooperating witness at the brokerage. It required subpoenaed call records. It required a formal documentation trail that took 3 weeks to assemble. During those 3 weeks, I went to work and attended my medical appointments and called my brother every Sunday and did not sleep particularly well. On a Tuesday in late November, Diane called me at 8 a.m. and said they were ready. The plan was not a dramatic ambush in an attorney's office. Diane was a prosecutor, not a screenwriter. What she needed was a recorded conversation in which Gideon either confirmed or further advanced the fraud, and she needed it to happen before he discovered the brokerage had flagged him and stopped his access. Her team had obtained a court order authorizing a consensual recording. All I had to do was make the call. I sat in a conference room at the DA's office. Diane and a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit sat across from me. A technician was monitoring the recording equipment. Someone had put a bottle of water on the table in front of me. I remember looking at it. I called Gideon on a Tuesday at 10 in the morning. He answered on the second ring. I told him I'd been thinking about the estate. I told him I wanted to consolidate my accounts, move everything into one place for simplicity while I was managing my health situation, and that I'd been talking to a financial advisor who recommended transferring my remaining brokerage balance into a new managed account. I told him I needed him to complete the transfer on my behalf since he had the POA. I didn't have the energy to deal with it directly. There was a pause. A short one. Then he said he thought that was a really good idea. He said it would be much simpler. He said he'd take care of it, not to worry. I asked him where the money would go. He said he'd set up a new account for me. He'd have all the details in a couple of days. I said, perfect. I really don't know what I'd do without you. He said, that's what family is for. Diane reached over and stopped the recording. The detective arrested Gideon at his home in Pittsburgh the following morning. He was charged with wire fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and breach of fiduciary duty. Under federal sentencing guidelines, the wire fraud charge alone carries up to 20 years. I know the moment he understood. I wasn't there, but Marcus told me later that when the detective read the charges and mentioned the recorded call, Gideon sat down in his kitchen chair like something had gone out of him. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse anyone of setting him up. He just sat there in his kitchen at 7 in the morning and stared at the table. The brokerage reversed the 2 completed transfers. My bank worked with law enforcement to recover the $47,000 from the checking account. Gideon hadn't moved most of it yet, still sitting in the GH Restoration LLC account waiting for the balloon payment due date. The total recovered was $103,000. The remaining $12,000 had already been used. I don't know for what, and I found that I didn't particularly want to know. His attorney negotiated a plea. Gideon pled guilty to 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of financial exploitation. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution of $115,000 to be paid from the liquidation of his company's assets and his personal property. His contracting business was dissolved. The business line of creditors came after whatever was left. The sentencing was in February. I attended. I sat in the second row and watched the judge explain to my brother, in plain terms, what he had done and what it meant. Gideon looked older than I remembered. He didn't look at me. Afterward, in the hallway, his attorney approached me. He said Gideon wanted me to know he was sorry, that he'd panicked, that he'd never intended for it to go this far, that he loved me. I listened to all of it, then I thanked the attorney for his time and walked to the elevator. I don't spend a lot of energy on the question of whether he meant it, whether he panicked or planned, whether the love was real or a performance. It doesn't change the spreadsheet. The numbers are the numbers. He saw my diagnosis as an opportunity, and he took it, methodically and patiently, while calling me every Sunday in a warm voice to ask how I was feeling. Whatever the emotional truth underneath that is, it isn't something I need to understand to move forward. The POA was revoked the same week he was arrested. I've since worked with an estate attorney to restructure how the remaining assets are managed. Everything is in my name alone, with a properly documented succession plan that I control entirely. It is not the most convenient arrangement. It requires more of my attention than handing it to a family member would. I don't care. My AVM, the malformation, the thing that started all of this, is still there. It will probably always be there. I still take my medication and see my neurologist every 4 months and occasionally have weeks where my left hand reminds me, briefly, that nothing about my body is fully certain. I've learned to work with that uncertainty rather than trying to hand it off to someone else to manage. That, more than anything, is what I want people to hear from this. Not a story about a villain, because Gideon isn't a cartoon. He is a person who made a series of deliberate choices when he thought no one was counting. People like that exist in every family. They look like the responsible one. They show up with groceries and sleep on your couch, and say that's what family is for. They understand, very precisely, how fear works, and they know that a frightened person will sign things they wouldn't sign when they're steady. So here's what I learned. First, access is not love. I gave Gideon access to my finances because I was scared and I needed help, and he was there. Those three things, fear, need, presence, are the exact conditions under which people extend trust they haven't yet verified. Access to your money, your accounts, your legal documents is not an expression of family closeness. It is a practical tool. Treat it like one. Give it only when necessary, only in the most limited form possible, and only with a second set of eyes reviewing it. Second, know your own numbers. I am a forensic accountant, and I was not checking my own bank account. I had set up autopay and assumed everything was running smoothly because I was tired and sick, and I told myself that Gideon had it. No one has it. You have it, or no one does. Even if you have trusted people around you, even if you are unwell and exhausted, find the 10 minutes a week to look at your own statements. No one can steal quietly from someone who is watching. Third, vulnerability is not an invitation. Being sick did not make me responsible for what my brother did. Being scared did not make me naive. Being willing to accept help did not make me a fool. There is a version of the story where I blame myself for signing those documents, for not being suspicious sooner, for not running a background check on my own brother. I have spent zero time in that version. The person who committed a crime was the person who committed the crime. Full stop. I have Priscilla to thank for most of this. A flag Zelle transaction and a text message she didn't have to send. She could have assumed I knew about it. She could have decided it wasn't her business. She sent the text. I think about that sometimes, how much weight a single moment of someone paying attention can carry. How different the outcome would have been if she hadn't noticed, or had noticed, and said nothing. If you're reading this and something feels off, a number that doesn't match, a statement you don't understand, a family member with access who gets defensive when you ask questions, pay attention to that feeling. You are not being paranoid. You are being a person with a brain that is working correctly. I am Claire. I manage my own accounts now. I'm doing fine. There are 3 things I want to leave you with, because I didn't go through all of this just to keep it to myself. The first is about paperwork. A power of attorney is one of the most powerful legal documents a person can sign, and most people sign it without fully understanding that. It can be written narrowly, limited to specific accounts, specific actions, a specific time window, or it can be written broadly. A durable POA written broadly, signed during a moment of fear and handed to the wrong person is a master key. If you ever need to set one up, use an independent attorney, not one suggested by the person receiving the authority. Build in expiration dates. Build in oversight requirements. And if anyone pressures you to sign quickly, that is your signal to slow down. The second is about the specific cruelty of financial abuse within families. It doesn't look like a robbery. It doesn't look like violence. It looks like help. It looks like someone organizing your fear into tasks. The warning signs are the same as the signs of genuine care, presence, attention, offers of assistance, which is why it works so well on people who are already overwhelmed. I'm not telling you not to accept help. I'm telling you that help and oversight can coexist. The people who truly want to help you will not object to transparency. The ones who pull away when you ask to see the records are the ones you need to watch. The third is the one that took me longest to arrive at. For months after the sentencing, I kept turning over the question of whether I should have known, whether there were signs I missed, whether a better, sharper, more vigilant version of me would have seen it coming before a single dollar left my account. I have finally let that question go. Not because I've forgiven Gideon. I haven't, and I'm not sure the framework of forgiveness makes sense here. There was no misunderstanding to forgive. There was a choice he made with full knowledge of what he was doing. What I've arrived at instead is something simpler. I survived it. I got most of it back. I restructured. I moved forward. The part of me that needed to be small and trusting and grateful for his presence, the part he was counting on, that part is gone now, and I don't miss it. I sleep well. I check my accounts every Sunday morning. I have a good neurologist and a better financial attorney and a colleague who notices things. It turns out that's enough. People ask me if I feel guilty. Not about reporting Gideon, about the fact that part of me saw it coming and chose not to see it at the same time. That's the honest version. There was a moment, somewhere around day 4, of him sleeping on my couch and reorganizing my kitchen and telling me not to worry about anything, where something in the back of my mind went quiet in a way that wasn't relief. I filed it away. I was scared and I was tired, and he was there. And sometimes when you need something to be true badly enough, you let yourself believe it. That's not weakness. I want to be clear about that. What Gideon did was a choice he made with complete awareness of what he was choosing. He looked at his sister lying on the floor, freshly diagnosed with something frightening, and he calculated. He didn't panic into it. He built a business entity, structured the transfer amounts, spaced them out to avoid detection. That is not a person who lost control of himself. That is a person who decided that my fear was an asset he could convert. The thing that gets me, the thing I still turn over sometimes, is the Sunday calls. 11 weeks of Sunday calls. His voice warm and consistent, asking how I was feeling, telling me to rest, telling me not to stress. All of it happening while the transfers were running. That's not cruelty in the dramatic sense. It's something quieter and harder to name. It's the willingness to perform love as a distraction from what your hands are doing. I don't think you arrive at that overnight. I think it takes years of small decisions, each one a little easier than the last, until the gap between what you say and what you do stops feeling like anything at all. What I know now is that actions always compound. The choices Gideon made didn't happen in isolation. They built on each other, and so did the consequences. His company had been cutting corners for 18 months before I got sick. The lawsuit, the bad debt, the high-interest credit line. None of that appeared from nowhere. By the time he sat on my couch with his duffel bag and his groceries, he had already spent years making decisions that prioritized short-term relief over honest reckoning. I was just the next available option. That's how it works. You don't suddenly become someone who steals from a sick sibling. You become that person gradually, one rationalization at a time, and then the circumstances arrive that make it easy. And Priscilla texted me. That's the part I come back to most. She didn't have to. The flag wasn't her department, the account wasn't hers, and asking a colleague about their personal finances is awkward at best. She sent the text anyway because she noticed something and decided that noticing wasn't enough. That single act of paying attention, of not talking herself out of it, is the reason I got most of my money back. Intelligence without the willingness to act on what you know is just spectating. She acted. I think about what it means to actually look at the people around you, not the performance they're giving, not the role they've cast themselves in, but the pattern of what they do when they think the cost is low and no one is counting. Gideon was counting on me not counting. The entire architecture of what he built depended on my trust being stronger than my attention. The moment I started paying attention, it was over. I'm not the same person I was the night I woke up with a numb hand and grabbed the nightstand. I don't think I'd want to be. She was someone who believed that being loved and being managed were different things. Now I know they can look identical from the inside, and the only way to tell the difference is to stay close to your own numbers, financial and otherwise. Know what you have, know where it is, know who can touch it. That's not cynicism. That's just being awake.